People fear being alone because they confuse solitude with rejection. They assume silence means abandonment. But being alone is not a punishment, it's a revelation. When the world quiets down and no one's there to tell you who you are, you begin to see yourself with painful, beautiful clarity. That's where growth begins. When you spend time alone, you discover the architecture of your own mind. You begin to notice the constant noise, the internal dialogue you've been drowning out with distractions, entertainment, and social approval. You realize how much of your life has been lived in reaction to others. The way you talk, dress, dream, it all carries traces of other people's expectations. Solitude removes that external pressure, and what's left is the raw material of your authentic self. It's not always pleasant. In fact, it's often uncomfortable. But that discomfort is the birthplace of self-understanding. The person who cannot be alone is never truly free. They're a slave to the presence of others, to the constant need for validation. They orbit around people the way the moon orbits a planet, never realizing they have their own gravity. But when you embrace solitude, you begin to generate your own light. You start to move independently with purpose and strength that isn't borrowed from anyone else. Solitude is the forge of individual strength. History's most profound thinkers, artists, and reformers, those who changed the world, did not find their vision in noise. They withdrew. They faced their demons in silence and returned stronger, sharper, and truer. The reason is simple. Solitude burns away illusion. When you're alone, there's no applause to deceive you, no distraction to protect you, no echo to comfort your insecurity. You must confront the truth about who you are and what you've been avoiding. That confrontation is terrifying, but it's also liberating. You cannot grow without truth. You cannot change without seeing what's broken. Solitude gives you that brutal honesty. It's a mirror that doesn't flatter you, and yet in that very harshness, there's love. The kind of love that wants you to evolve rather than stay comfortable. In the quiet, your creativity awakens. You begin to hear your own ideas instead of the world's noise. Innovation doesn't thrive in constant connection. It needs distance. The artist, the writer, the visionary, they all step away from the crowd so they can listen to the whispers of their own imagination. That's why solitude isn't a void. It's fertile ground. It's where new thoughts, new paths, and new identities take shape. But there's a deeper lesson here. Choosing solitude isn't about cutting the world off. It's about building a stronger foundation from which you can engage with it. When you learn to enjoy your own company, you stop clinging to people out of fear. You no longer enter relationships from emptiness, but from wholeness. You bring peace instead of demand, understanding instead of neediness. That's what emotional maturity looks like. The ability to be with others without losing yourself. So no, being alone isn't lonely. Loneliness is not the absence of people. It's the absence of connection with yourself. When you are connected to your purpose, your values, and your inner voice, solitude becomes sacred. It becomes the sanctuary where you restore your soul and rebuild your strength. If you can stand to be alone, you become unbreakable, because no rejection can shake you, no absence can define you, and no silence can scare you. You've already faced the hardest thing there is, the echo of your own heart, and learn to be at peace with it. So take time to withdraw, not to escape the world, but to meet the person who will one day lead it, you. When you strip away the noise of the world, when you're not surrounded by friends, co-workers, or constant stimulation, something remarkable happens. You meet yourself. And for many people, that's terrifying, because most have built their identity on how others see them. Their sense of worth is borrowed. It depends on approval, on being needed, on being liked. But solitude takes all that away. It removes the mirrors that reflect who you think you are, and it forces you to look inward, into the parts you've neglected or hidden. When you're alone, you begin to see the structure of your own mind, your patterns, your fears, the narratives you've been repeating. You notice how often you seek distraction just to avoid silence, how much of your energy goes into maintaining an image rather than developing your essence. In that silence, you start realizing which parts of you are genuine and which are performance. And that realization, though uncomfortable, is the first step toward authenticity. Most people want to be free but are terrified of solitude, not realizing that freedom and solitude are inseparable. If you can't sit with your own thoughts, you're not free, you're dependent. The person who learns to enjoy solitude learns to direct their life from within, not from external noise. Solitude is not emptiness, it's self-encounter. It's where you stop pretending and start becoming. And the truth is simple but hard to face. Until you meet yourself in solitude, you'll never truly meet anyone else. Strength isn't built in the comfort of company, it's built in the silence of solitude. When you're alone, there's no one to carry the weight for you, no one to reassure you that everything will be fine. You're forced to rely on yourself to confront the full reality of your situation without excuses or distractions. That's where inner strength begins to form, not as arrogance or hardness, but as quiet self-reliance. You start to realize that the discipline to keep going, even when no one's watching, is the foundation of real power. In solitude, there are no shortcuts. You can't outsource responsibility. You can't blame anyone else when things fall apart. It's just you, your choices, and the consequences they create. That awareness, painful as it may be, sharpens you. It teaches you accountability, patience, and endurance. It transforms weakness into resilience, because every time you face your struggles alone and push through, you're building an unshakable core, something that can't be taken away by circumstance or opinion. People who constantly seek validation never develop that internal strength. They depend on others to tell them they're doing enough, that they're worthy. But the person who has faced hardship alone, who has stood in the silence and kept moving, carries something far more valuable than approval. They carry certainty. And that's the paradox of solitude. It feels isolating at first, but it forges the kind of strength that makes you whole. You don't escape the world by being alone. You prepare to stand taller in it. When you finally find yourself in solitude, stripped of distraction and noise, you start encountering truths you've been running from. The silence exposes what busyness conceals. You begin to see the parts of yourself you've avoided, the laziness disguised as rest, the resentment masked as boundaries, the fear pretending to be realism. Alone, there's no one left to blame. The stories you've told yourself about why life isn't working start to unravel, and what's left is the raw, unfiltered truth of who you are and what you've chosen. That confrontation can feel brutal. It's uncomfortable to admit that much of your suffering is self-inflicted, that your unfulfilled potential is often guarded by your own excuses. But that discomfort is sacred. It's the price of clarity. The truth doesn't come wrapped in comfort, it comes wrapped in pain. Yet within that pain lies the invitation to change. When you face the truth, you reclaim power. You stop being a victim of your own denial and start becoming the architect of your future. The world is filled with people who would rather drown in distraction than sit in silence with themselves. But those who dare to face the truth earn something rare: self-respect. Because once you've seen your own flaws clearly and chosen to rise above them, no external judgment can shake you. Solitude exposes the truth not to destroy you, but to rebuild you. Stronger, clearer, and more aligned with the person you were meant to become. When you finally embrace solitude, something extraordinary begins to happen. The noise fades and the mind starts to breathe. You begin to think clearly, not reactively. Creativity, insight, and originality are born in that quiet space where your thoughts are no longer competing with the constant input of the world. When you're always surrounded by others, your mind becomes a mirror. It reflects what it sees but rarely creates anything new. But when you step back, when you sit in stillness and allow your thoughts to settle, you start to generate ideas that are uniquely yours. Solitude gives you the mental distance needed to see patterns, to connect concepts that seemed unrelated, to recognize truths that can't emerge in chaos. The greatest thinkers, artists, and innovators all share one thing in common. They learned how to be alone long enough to listen to their own mind. Because creativity is not loud, it whispers. And if your life is filled with constant noise, you'll miss the subtle call of inspiration. That's the tragedy of modern life. People are never truly alone. They're connected, distracted, entertained, but rarely still. And as a result, their minds never wander deeply enough to find meaning. But if you learn to cultivate solitude intentionally, it becomes a creative laboratory for the soul. In the quiet, imagination wakes up, vision returns, and the person who learns to think alone eventually becomes the one the world turns to for answers. Choosing solitude isn't a sign of sadness or social failure. It's a mark of maturity. It means you've reached a point where your sense of identity no longer depends on constant affirmation from others. You begin to understand that peace doesn't come from being surrounded by people. It comes from being centered within yourself. Most people chase companionship not because they love connection, but because they fear their own emptiness. They use others to fill the silence, to distract from unresolved thoughts. But when you learn to be alone without feeling lonely, you've crossed an invisible threshold. You become emotionally independent. Solitude teaches you balance. It shows you that relationships thrive not when two people complete each other, but when two complete individuals choose to share their strength. When you enjoy your own company, you stop demanding that others carry your insecurities. You bring stability instead of chaos, depth instead of neediness. That shift changes everything from how you love to how you lead. There's a quiet dignity in being self-contained, in knowing that your value doesn't fluctuate with attention. You stop chasing validation and you start attracting respect. You begin to understand that solitude isn't isolation, it's preparation. It's the training ground for self-awareness, confidence, and genuine connection. When you can stand alone, you no longer fear loss, rejection, or silence, because you've already discovered the one thing no one can take from you: yourself. And that discovery changes the way you live forever.